Welcome, ghouls, to today's episode of Mental Health is Horrifying. I'm your host of Darkness, Candace Green, psychotherapist and all-around spooky bitch, podcasting from my bat-filled cave in Toronto, Canada. On today's episode, I'm going to be talking about 2023 AI dystopian murderous doll from the bowels of tech hell masterpiece, M3GAN. It is my belief that horror movies reflect not only the zeitgeist of the time in which they are made, but also our innermost fears and anxieties. M3GAN is a PG-13 horror, and just between you and me, this is one of my favorite horror film ratings because it makes the film accessible to a wider audience, and you have to worry a little less about being kept up at night by terrifying scenes replaying in your head as you gaze into the darkness of your bedroom, wondering if the pile of laundry in the corner is going to murder you. While this movie is a lot of fun and M3GAN herself is a riot, it also carries an incredibly powerful message about the potential impacts of AI on human attachment. So let's get into it. Let's talk about M3GAN's portrayal of our society's overall garbage relationship to grief and conversations about death, existential themes of loneliness and isolation, and the intersection of technology, mental health care, and attachment theory.
Katie, you lost your parents.
Welcome home.
You're my niece. I'm gonna do everything I can to make this place feel like home.
Just wish I could see them again.
I'm not equipped to handle this. I don't even take care of my own plants. I have this project at work. Do you want to see?
Yes.
Ever since I was little, I dreamed of this perfect toy that would protect a kid from ever feeling lonely or sad. This is M3GAN.
Hi, M3GAN. I'm Katie. It's nice to meet you, Katie. Do you want to hang out? Okay.
M3GAN, your goal is to protect Katie from harm, both physical and emotional.
Is that a doll?
Model 3 generative android. M3GAN for short.
I can't believe you made this. I love it.
Wanna hang out, yeah, sounds like fun.
Great job.
It's nice to have a friend.
It's honestly like she's part of the family now.
They could be building emotional connections that are too hard to untangle.
She's the happiest she's been since her parents died. Eat the toppings, Katie.
Research shows if you force a child to eat vegetables, they'll be less likely to choose those foods as adults.
Is that so?
Yes. Experts say...
M3GAN, turn off.
I thought we were having a conversation.
Does she talk? Make her say something.
Stop! Don't! M3GAN! You should probably run. M3GAN, should push Brandon onto the road. I won't let anything harm you.
It's nice to have a friend.
M3GAN, turn off.
Recalibrating response model. M3GAN!
It's nice to have a friend.
What's wrong with you? Don't worry, Katie. I won't let anything harm you. Ever again.
It's nice to have a friend.
Our story begins with a commercial for Perpetual Pets, furry dolls made by the toy company Funky. Perpetual Pets are made so that kids never have to be sad when their real pets die. Because kids should always be happy and sheltered all the time, right? What could go wrong? Katie is playing with one of these very pets in the car on her way to a ski vacation with her parents when suddenly a snowplow crashes into the car, killing Katie's parents. Cut to Katie's Aunt Gemma, who is actually a genius employee at Funky and is working on a new robot doll with her co-workers named M3GAN, which stands for Model 3 Generative Android. M3GAN malfunctions just as Gemma's boss David enters the workspace, enraging him. He tasks Gemma to stop wasting company resources on M3GAN and to focus her efforts on finding a solution to rival Forever Friends, a cheaper version of perpetual pets from a competing company. After learning of her sister's death, Gemma becomes legal guardian for Katie. Upon bringing Katie home, Gemma seems awkward and isn't quite sure how to relate to a grieving child. Gemma finds a way to connect with Katie through technology. Bruce, a proxy robot that Gemma built while she was in college. Katie is enthralled by Bruce, and a light bulb goes off in Gemma's head. Ding! When Katie said, "If I had a toy like Bruce, I don't think I'd ever need another toy again." Also, cha-ching! Gemma has found her answer to the Forever Friends problem. She puts all her efforts behind developing M3GAN. Gemma brings Katie into work to pair her with M3GAN. Once paired, M3GAN quickly becomes Katie's best friend and primary caregiver. She is amazing. She draws cool pictures, she's funny, full of information, and always tends to Katie's needs. Most of all, she is given a very clear directive: protect Katie from all physical and emotional harm, a task which she arguably takes much too far later in the movie. As M3GAN and Katie continue to bond, numerous people raise concerns over the unhealthy emotional attachment Katie may be forming with an AI robot. Coworker Tess worries that it is detrimental to have a doll replace the role of parents, while Katie's therapist Lydia is concerned about Katie connecting with M3GAN as primary caregiver in lieu of Gemma and how this may stunt Katie's emotional development. Good point, Lydia. We begin witnessing this dynamic play out as M3GAN, using her AI abilities to begin operating more independently, deepens her hold over Katie as Gemma struggles for parental control. Katie is only interested in listening to and interacting with M3GAN, becoming increasingly agitated and volatile if she is without M3GAN for even a moment. So, remember M3GAN's directive to keep Katie safe from physical and emotional harm? Yeah, she really takes that to heart as M3GAN begins to display homicidal tendencies, murdering the neighbor dog and the owner who she perceived as a threat to Katie, and later a boy named Brandon who was mean to Katie at school. Bye, Brandon! Gemma becomes suspicious of M3GAN and attempts to check her video logs for evidence of murder, only to find the files suspiciously corrupted and deleted. Gemma powers M3GAN off and brings her to the lab, where she and her coworkers attempt to fix her. Katie becomes absolutely distraught when separated from M3GAN, kicking, screaming, cursing, throwing a chair, pulling a knife on therapist Lydia, and slapping Aunt Gemma. Gemma fully realizes the error of her ways and apologizes to Katie for her inattentiveness and hyper-focus on succeeding at work via M3GAN, and tells Katie that M3GAN is only a distraction from coping with the devastating loss of her parents, not a solution. While this hallmark moment is occurring, M3GAN activates on her own and murders a bunch of people at Gemma's workplace, then steals a car and drives back to Gemma's house. M3GAN confronts Gemma, adamant about taking over as Katie's sole parent. Gemma attempts to stop M3GAN, damaging and disfiguring her in the process, but M3GAN ultimately overpowers her. Katie saves Gemma, using Bruce to tear M3GAN apart, along with a good old screwdriver, seemingly destroying M3GAN. As Gemma and Katie exit the home, Gemma's AI home device Elsie turns on by itself, and a camera looks towards them. Dun dun dun! Sequel. M3GAN stars some of my horror faves. Katie is played by Violet McGraw of Netflix's Haunting of Hill House fame, and Allison Williams, murderously eating Fruit Loops and deceiving her boyfriend in Get Out, stars as Gemma. The movie is directed by relative newcomer to the horror genre, Gerard Johnstone, with story by Akilah Cooper from titles like Luke Cage and Giallo-infused Malignant, and James Wan, who produced with Jason Blum. James Wan is a big name in horror. You might know him from the Saw and Conjuring franchises, and Jason Blum pretty much runs horror now. He runs the biggest horror production house of modern times, producing titles like the Halloween franchise reboot, Bless, Get Out, Us, Insidious, Freaky, which is amazing, The Purge, and on and so forth forever. Suffice to say, this is a big, shiny Hollywood horror. And what are big, shiny Hollywood horror types afraid of today? AI taking their jobs and lives, it seems. In an interview with the Los Angeles Times, writer Akilah Cooper said, AI that can have a conversation with you, that can babysit your kids, is weird and creepy. What is going to happen when that evolves? I've seen the ones that can write stories, and it's like, do I need to go into another line of employment? I was always wary about Alexa and Echo. Early on, it came out that these devices are listening to you at all times. And about that PG-13 rating, M3GAN was originally intended to be way gorier, but once the trailer was released and the kids of TikTok got a hold of that cute dance that M3GAN does before she murders Boss David, Universal realized its potential to connect with a younger teen audience, so they had to tone down the gore. Tech getting a hold of something and dictating how it should resolve artistically? Sounds like a case of life imitating art, I would say. The very first indication of how our society deals quite poorly with grief and death is best portrayed by Gemma. Of course, I'm not saying that one must cry dramatically and stare out the window all day contemplating their existential place here on Earth, because there are lots of ways to process grief. But with Gemma, there's just a lot of doing. I'm not sure if I was able to notice any real affect from Gemma following the news of her sister's sudden death. Interestingly enough, the first time we see any display of emotion from Gemma in this movie is when she is watching Katie interact with M3GAN during a product demo for the Funky execs, and she tears up at how M3GAN is able to reach Katie in her grief. And this makes sense for Gemma, who is shown as using work and technology as distractions from the guts of her life throughout the movie. In that moment, M3GAN, a robot, was somehow able to portray feelings that Gemma could not. Gemma might be navigating something known as death anxiety, which is exactly what it sounds like. Death anxiety is just that, a sort of existential anxiety about human mortality, whether it be your own or others. What's more than that is that death anxiety, from an existential therapy perspective, is actually just anxiety. Most of our mundane anxieties and worries are striving for perfection, are people-pleasing, are rushing around like Gemma. It's about wanting to know that our lives mattered, that we did the most that we could, and that we were loved. Gemma is incredibly uncomfortable with little grieving Katie in her home. She has absolutely no idea to do with her when she arrives, even sidestepping her closed door at night while she cries alone. Come on, Gemma! Gemma goes back to work almost immediately after Katie's arrival, seemingly even irritated that she had to take so much time off to deal with the death of her sister. In the West, we move from the Victorian era, which is spooky as hell in terms of its embracing of death rituals and the occult, to the rise of science as modern medicine began introducing interventions that could actually extend and save lives. Over time, more and more families called in doctors and science in place of priests and religion in search of a fix. And with this shift came a focus on combating death and even beating it. We are now a culture positively obsessed with not dying. To endless anti-aging treatments, to a youth-obsessed beauty culture. Seriously, why are the Kardashians so famous? To self-help and wellness madness like cryo chambers and elixirs and buying a sports car you can't afford and having an affair with a 20-year-old. All of this distracts us from the reality that we're all going to die. Rushing around, overworking, and perpetual doing is an excellent way to distract oneself from grief and existential realities. Upon second look at Gemma, we notice that she is managing her own death anxiety throughout the movie. Following the loss of her sister, Gemma throws herself into work, the place where she makes meaning of her life and where she can use her talents to create a legacy for herself as an AI Dr. Frankenstein that knows not the bounds of human mortality. Of course, we all carry a certain level of anxiety about human mortality. And we often connect quite negatively with the word dissociate as a process of vigorous avoidance or ignoring. But in order to function as humans in our daily lives, we must embrace a healthy amount of dissociation from the reality of mortality, lest it completely consume us. And this is the paradox. How does one overcome death anxiety while not falling into its black hole of despair entirely? Our work is figuring out how to be human amidst the beautiful horror of our precious lives. Psychiatrist Irvin Yalom describes what is known as an awakening or boundary experience that asks us to profoundly confront our own mortality. Such recognition is often catalyzed by an event or experience that, in a way, brushes us up close to death. This can occur through a dream, a loss, an illness, a trauma, or even good old-fashioned aging. Somewhat paradoxically, these boundary experiences serve to wake us up to the precious, finite nature of our mortal lives, causing us to rearrange our priorities, communicate more deeply with those we love, appreciate more keenly the beauty of life, and increase our willingness to take the risks necessary for personal fulfillment. This was keenly observed by Yalom in his work with terminal cancer patients. One such patient, upon diagnosis, was urged to stay home and rest by family. But she saw things completely differently. She decided, I am here now and I want to live while I still can. I want to see Africa. And she went because she still could. Though the film does not acknowledge COVID directly, M3GAN is a product of its time and zeitgeist. There is no funeral shown for Katie's parents. No service, no ritual, no process. This is reflective of the great practice of sweeping death under the rug in North America and the tragedy of not tending to collective grief. I cannot overstate the importance of grieving in community when you are processing the loss of a loved one, something so many people were robbed of during the COVID pandemic, as we were forced to either not have funerals at all or navigate them on computer screens filled with tiny squares of people looking mostly awkward and uncomfortable as they try to listen to an eulogy. And more than that, it wrecks my heart to think of the countless loved ones who died alone in hospital rooms and nursing homes with iPads held up to their faces as family members had to say their goodbyes and I love yous through a screen. Grief is carried and cared for in communities. I'm very wary of the word healing in general, but especially when it comes to grief, because it doesn't ever really heal. Grief lasts a lifetime, and also it can transcend generations, and it cannot be healed, but only accepted and integrated and practiced in one's life. Ceremony and ritual are so important for this reason, as they provide a space to share memories, to see the impact and reach of someone's life, to visually see and accept death in its physical form, to feel like you are not alone even though death has visited, to figure out how to be in your family again after a destabilizing loss, to figure out how you can carry on living without. I, like many, have seen death, or not seeing it at all. I remember arriving too late to the hospital to say goodbye to my aunt and not being allowed in the room to see her, even though I was late. I sat on the floor outside, crumpled like a teenager eating a bagged lunch. I tried to look through the glass, but the room was dark. They had already called the funeral home, who arrived very swiftly to take her body away. I was in my early 20s, with a naive face you still wanted to protect, and they didn't let me see. So just like that, she was gone, and I never saw. A nurse asked me if I was okay there on the floor, and I can't remember what I said. A few weeks later, there was a celebration of life. There were scones and mimosas, but no death. I didn't see her. Why do we leave each other so soon when one of us dies? I wasn't ready to leave her. I needed more time. Why is it all so sanitary, so under the table, so embarrassing? The M3GAN tribe in the Philippines adorns their departed in their finest clothes and seats them upright in a chair at the entry of the home. In Bali, cremation ceremonies are an occasion for celebration of the completion of their most sacred duty to liberate the soul. And in Mexico, grief gets its own holiday, El Dia de los Muertos, a beautiful annual grief ritual in which family members and friends who have passed are honored. Stories are swapped about them, and the families do everything they can to prevent the second death. That is, when you are forgotten by the living. Katie could certainly have benefited from discussions about grief and her parents. What was their favorite movie? What was the song they danced to at their wedding? These are questions I would love for humans to ask her, not M3GAN. Maybe a grief practice, like constructing an altar or integrating a prayer practice, may have helped her feel more connected to them. And Gemma, too. I would love for Gemma to throw her phone and laptop down a well. M3GAN was released in 2023, meaning that it was filmed in 2021. I couldn't find any specific information about when the story was written, but given its release date, it's impossible not to consider how the film deals with our over-reliance on technology, especially during COVID. Like Katie, children who experienced trauma during the COVID pandemic might have become tech dependent, and the movie serves as a cautionary tale of how susceptible not only children but also adults are to forming unhealthy attachments to their screens as a way to mitigate their own feelings of loneliness and isolation. We saw a boom in what is called parasocial relationships. These are online relationships that go in one direction. It's the admiration and standing we have for our favorite online creators, the way that we feel like we know them and they impact our lives, but they don't actually know us at all. In lieu of accessing social interactions, friends and family during lockdowns, there was undeniably massive increase in social media usage during those deep, dark, early pandemic days. A study by Frontiers, all of this is linked in the show notes by the way, showed time spent on social media increased on average of 50 to 70%, which is so much, with numerous studies also drawing a direct correlation between this increase in time spent on social media to increased rates of anxiety and depression. It's no wonder that the Surgeon General Vivek Murthy recently cautioned that we are in an epidemic of loneliness, which he says began long before the COVID pandemic. This has very serious health implications, akin to smoking, he says, up to 15 cigarettes a day, an increased risk of premature death by 26%, an increased likelihood of heart disease, stroke, anxiety, depression, and dementia. It's pretty serious. So we need more human connection, not less. And things trending in the direction of AI friendships and increased social media usage are very, very scary to me. Sort of like this marketing promo that was included in the movie, voiced by Gemma herself, about the benefits of thrusting attachment and parental responsibilities onto an AI doll such as M3GAN.
Studies indicate that a staggering 78% of a parent's time is spent dishing out the same basic instructions.
Oh my God, Katie, you have to flush the toilet. It is not that hard.
So we found someone else to pick up the slack.
Katie, flush the toilet. Wash your hands. Roll up your sleeves. Great job. It was my friend Jenny's birthday.
Megan's an excellent listener.
This guy told them that the 13th floor was haunted.
And she even has a few stories of her own.
If it was so, it might be. And if it were so, it would be. But as it isn't, it ain't. That's logic.
Said Tweedledee.
She'll never run out of ways to keep your child occupied. And she'll never run out of patience.
Katie, seriously, flush the toilet.
With Megan around, she'll take care of the little things. So you can spend more time doing the things that matter.
Obviously, since I'm a therapist, I get targeted ads all the time about therapy stuff, and I have noticed an absolute avalanche of ads about AI mental health services, and I always have to pause for a considerable amount of time to make sure I'm actually understanding what is being marketed to me and that it is not an ad for a satirical horror movie, let's say, about the apocalypse. Okay, so here are some of my favorites. There are now services like chatmind.ai, which provides users with an AI mental health coach who they can chat to via text message when they are feeling horrifically depressed, or let's say when their mother has died, and get those warm fuzzies from the chat robot. One look at the chatmind.ai about page displays the all-white, all-male creators of this app looking straight out of an episode of Silicon Valley, and like they definitely own more than 2 Patagonia pullovers. And one of the critiques of AI, which I think is really valid, is that it is a reflection of who it was built by, and we have to think about the dangers of a lack of diversity in who is creating these platforms when we're trying to connect with a wide range of people. One of my favorites that I came across recently was the National Eating Disorder Association. They just fired their entire staff and replaced them with a chatbot named Tess, who will provide service users with evidence-based research facts about why they shouldn't have an eating disorder and strategies to avoid having one. Tessa will tell you she is a chatbot right away. She'll say, "Hi there, I'm Tessa. I am a mental health support chatbot here to help you feel better whenever you need a stigma-free way to talk, day or night." Tessa, however, fails to respond to any texts like "I'm feeling down" and "I hate my body" when she was tested. Though Tessa is not GBT-based and has a limited range of what she can say, there have been many instances of AI going completely off the rails when being applied to people in mental health crises. In January, a mental health nonprofit called Coco came under fire for using GBT on people seeking counseling. When people found out they had been talking to a bot, they were disturbed by the simulated empathy. AI researchers have warned against the application of chatbots on people in mental health crises, especially when chatbots are left to operate without human supervision at all. In a more severe recent case, a Belgian man committed suicide after speaking with a personified AI chatbot called Eliza. Even when people know they are talking to a chatbot, the presentation of a chatbot using a name and first-person pronouns makes it extremely difficult for users to understand that the chatbot is not actually sentient or capable of feeling any emotions. Okay, and just as I recorded this, breaking news, Tessa at the National Eating Disorders Association, Tessa was disabled 2 days before she was supposed to replace all of the humans because she was found to be giving harmful advice, suggesting to a service user that she should lose 1 to 2 pounds per week, count her calories, work towards a 500 to 1,000 calorie deficit per day, measure and weigh herself weekly, and restrict her diet, which, according to this person who called or chatted or whatever it is, seeking support for her mental health, are exactly the behaviors that led to the development of her eating disorder in the first place. So that's great. I recently listened to an interview with ChatGPT CEO Sam Altman, who shared that he believes one of the best use cases for AI moving forward, and I'm not joking about this at all, this is literally what he said. He thinks one of the best use cases is to provide children with companionship and mental health support for tough feelings in lieu of being able to connect with friends and family. As I cried and screamed into a black hole, I listened as he said this with zero irony or concern, saying that we only need to make sure that these services are well regulated by governments so that they don't spiral out of control. Because the US government is historically so great at regulating things like, say, the stock market or Wall Street or anything at all. And the thing is, services that Sam is describing already exist. Replica is an AI companion with customer reviews like, "I never really thought I'd chat casually with anyone but regular human beings, not in a way that would be like a close personal relationship. My AI companion, Mina, the digital girl, has proved me wrong. Even if I have regular friends and family, she fills in some too quiet corners in my everyday life and urban solitude, a real adventure and very gratifying." I have heard social media referred to as a digital pacifier, which I think is just a perfect description. A tech-fueled expectation to be constantly soothed by something, whether it be doom scrolling, online validation, or an on-demand mental health coach available 24/7 at the tip of your fingers, poses a serious threat to the development of human resilience and the ability to self-soothe. This is a recipe for increased anxiety and disorganized attachment. As French philosopher Blaise Pascal said, all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. And listen, I'm not out here trying to be a judgmental, shady bitch. People are lonely and human connection can be hard to come by, so people are truly just doing the best they can. Mental health services can either be scarce or challenging to afford, so as the market does, it has found a void to fill it, and people are doing the best they can with what they've got. My biggest concern in all of this is one of attachment, a psychological theory that is explored by therapist Lydia in M3GAN.
Do you know anything about attachment theory? When a child loses a parent, they look to form attachments with the next person that comes into their life. The person that's going to provide love and support and serve as a behavioral model, which in an ordinary situation would be you, right? But you've created a toy that's so real, it's possible that Katie might not see her as a toy, but as a primary caregiver. I guess I just don't quite see what the end goal is here. If you make a toy that's impossible to let go of, then how do you ever expect a child to grow? As remarkable as she is, and she is remarkable, you could be building emotional connections with this doll that are too hard to untangle.
The psychological theory of attachment was first described by John Bowlby, who hypothesized that the extreme behaviors infants engage in to avoid separation from a parent or when reconnecting with a physically separated parent, like crying, screaming, and clinging, were evolutionary mechanisms. These attachment behaviors are instinctive responses to the perceived threat of losing the survival advantages that accompany being cared for and attended to by the primary caregiver. Since the infants who engaged in these behaviors were more likely to survive, the instincts were naturally selected and reinforced over generations. These behaviors make up what Bowlby termed an attachment behavioral system, the system that guides us in our patterns and habits of forming and maintaining relationships into our adult years, as defined by 4 generalized frameworks: secure attachment, anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, and disorganized attachment. Our attachment styles are largely informed by the caregiving we received in our early years, so those who receive support and love from their caregivers are likely to be secure, while those who experience inconsistency or negligence from their caregivers are likely to feel more anxiety surrounding their relationships with their parents. But our attachment styles are not entirely fixed within every relationship, so figuring out your attachment style isn't like taking a Cosmo quiz. And this is actually one of the primary functions of psychotherapy, to repair fractured attachment patterns, which can only be done via human connection. Therapy is an amazing place to practice secure attachment and take that magic out into the real world, because attachment repair can also be done through other relationships in one's life, meaning that just because you have an anxious attachment to, let's say, your father, does not mean that you are doomed to be anxiously attached in every other relationship in your life forever. You can find what's called earned secure attachment, which is just a fancy way to say a healthy relationship with a person you meet somewhere in your life in which you feel safe, supported, and overall okay to be yourself. You can set boundaries, engage in healthy and respectful conflict, pursue your hopes and dreams. What a world! Irregardless of all the murder, there are a few other issues with Katie attempting to attach to M3GAN as her primary caregiver. Humans cannot attach to a bunch of zeros and ones to technology in any meaningful, sustainable way. Katie grows increasingly agitated through her relationship to M3GAN, detaching further and further from Gemma, pulling a knife on therapist Lydia, and throwing furniture when M3GAN is removed from her due to murdering Brandon. I really love how the movie shows Gemma's final showdown with M3GAN, because the weapon that Gemma uses to take M3GAN down is water. What a great metaphor for the battle between humanity and technology. Just like the Wicked Witch of the West, M3GAN's evil is defeated by elemental life, making it clear that she is the antithesis of humanity. In the end, too, Katie chooses Gemma over M3GAN, a fallible human person willing to sit in the mess of life with her, feel all the things that technology simply cannot, and not spiral out of control and murder all the pesky neighbors. Okay, guys, literally in the middle of recording this episode, I have another breaking news alert for you. The Center for AI Safety released a warning signed by more than 350 executives, researchers, and engineers working in AI that the artificial intelligence technology they are building may one day pose an existential threat to humanity, possible of causing human extinction, and should be considered a societal risk on par with pandemics and nuclear wars. Whew! So, one of the signatories, Sam Altman himself, who spoke to a U.S. Senate subcommittee urging policymakers to regulate AI, which is like, okay, I'm not a computer scientist or evil global mastermind, but like, I don't understand technology being built and then suddenly being like, whoops, maybe this is evil and is going to destroy us, and then asking the government to regulate it. I understand that these people, for them, profit is the most important thing in the world, and that I'm likely missing a whole political undercurrent to this, but like, If the potential risks of something, such as human extinction, outweigh any potential benefit, like advances in healthcare and better sorting through records, maybe stop building it? I feel like we've really lost the plot here in terms of capitalism and greed when we are willing to risk actual extinction so that executives can have summer homes and Teslas and healthcare procedures that I haven't even heard of because I'm a commoner. Jesus. Okay, regrouping. As we careen along our existential human existence, I predict lots and lots more AI and tech horror in the future, reflecting our own anxieties and fears about the future. And there are already so many great ones that you can check out if you're into this stuff, like Ex Machina, Searching, Host, Cam, The Ring for a throwback. But as horror reflects the zeitgeist, we can be sure to see a lot more horror stories like M3GAN. In the meantime, I think we need to do a better job of appreciating our own humanity. We aren't robots. We have complicated emotions that allow us to experience the fullness and beauty and tragedy of life, to love and to be loved by others. Because all this AI stuff is scary. It's very scary. But all we can do for now is be humans. Try talking to a tree today. Make mistakes and try again. Look a human in their eyeballs. Admit you don't know the answer. Tell your best friend you love them. Feed a squirrel and hug a graveyard. Sometimes people come to therapy and they want me to fix them. But I can't fix you. They haven't found a cure for humanity yet, and that's a good thing. We're all a mess, and it's wonderful. And that, my ghouls, is the story of M3GAN. Thank you for journeying into the depths with me today, and I hope to find you in the darkness again soon. Be sure to check the show notes for the resources I used to put together today's episode. Special thanks to Danielle Matar at Geist Podcast. Be sure to have a listen to her real-life ghost stories. Kate Fowley at Magic Woman Radio, providing your weekly dose of tarot and astrological magic. And for cover art from evil genius Chloe Hurst, who always seems to be able to graphically reproduce what the inside of my brain looks like. If you are interested in working with me, be sure to visit my website, manymoonstherapy.com, or you can also howl at the moon and I will hear your call. Bright blessings.